Hello and welcome to Ask GC Anything.
Well, we say anything, but actually we've got lots of questions and answers about training today because that's what you guys sent in as questions.
Yeah, and also some tech ones as well. I'd like to put those on the table as well, Emma. We need to address those.
Right, okay, we will do our best to answer.
We will indeed. Right, first question. This one comes in from Lorenzo S, and this is a training question. So Lorenzo has asked, how do two riders with disparate levels of strength, fitness, form, yet who ride together frequently because they like to, actually influence each other's form? Specifically, he's saying he worries about accumulated fatigue of the less strong rider, because obviously forced to try harder to keep up, and then would the stronger rider detrain effectively by having to ride at someone else's pace? So it's a good question, that.
Yeah, I think it comes up a lot because I think a lot of people like to ride with their friends, and that's a good thing. It makes it more fun. And I used to find that training with other people actually made me train better because having other people to compete against a bit on the hills. But if there's two of you and you're riding next to each other and one's stronger, then obviously one person's going to be training harder relative to their threshold or whatever measure you choose than the other rider. And so you could end up with one rider getting too tired and the other one taking it too easy. And so there's one simple way of cycling, which is that the weaker rider sits behind and then you benefit from the draft. But that kind of defines...
Less sociable, isn't it?
It is a lot less sociable. It's hard to have a conversation when you're shouting over your shoulder.
Yeah, personally, I think there's no problem when one rider going off and doing intervals or whatever, as long as you sit down beforehand and say, you know what, on this climb, I'm going to go and do this, and I'll wait for you at the top. Yeah. So that's definitely one way of doing it.
And in fact, both riders can do intervals, because you can do your intervals at your own pace, and then regroup for the warm down, and then you got your sociable bit and your antisocial bit.
Yeah. Hey, we used to do this cool thing actually on training camps years and years and years ago, where the stronger rider would do like a 4-minute interval, and then the less strong rider would hang around halfway up the climb and do a 2-minute interval. But because they were fresher, they would then end up putting the stronger rider under a lot of pressure. Yeah. So you then end up obviously you have to do 2 minutes as opposed to 4 minutes, but you can end up having quite a lot of fun together because the less strong rider really puts the hurt on the stronger rider.
Yeah, and I think that's what's great about training with other people is pushing people. As long as it's friendly, it's really fun. It's way more fun, and it's better training often.
Yeah, use your imagination, I think. But conveniently, you made a video about it, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. How to train in a group without being too antisocial. And I do think it's also important to remember that not every ride has to be like fixed zones, 3.5 minutes at this cadence and this power or whatever.
No, thank goodness.
No, exactly. A lot of cycling is riding, and you don't have to do something specific in every ride. So riding with someone who's a different pace to you is not a problem, mostly. But maybe if you're trying to train for something specific, maybe not every ride.
Yeah. Anyway, for some more tips, check out the vid behind us.
It's only a little bit of cobbles, Emma, come on.
No, I don't like
No,
them.
you can be sociable and considerate. It's just a bit bumpy.
I just bumpy.
Come on.
Now to a question about what sounds like a training injury or almost a training injury from Monkey NKL. So this is Ballard T. Edwards V. Good name. Cool. And he says, here I sit after 2 days straight riding vigorously with power. Today I'm in pain. My right leg is 1/2 an inch shorter than the left. The inside and outside leg is very stiff. I can feel like a stiff ligament on both sides. Doesn't want just a band-aid solution. How can I compensate for the discrepancy, you gurus of the cycling world? Well, thanks for calling us gurus for a start.
Right, okay. Well, the first thing is, if it is like a biomechanical issue, like a leg length discrepancy, I don't think either of us are actually qualified to advise you on that. So I would seek out a very reputable and experienced bike fitter, because when you start messing around with things like on Bike Fit, particularly if you're trying to offset a leg length discrepancy, then you can end up doing more harm than good. Because I think that a lot of people probably do have leg length discrepancies and they never know about it because it's never actually the cause of a problem. Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily pin all the blame on that. There could be other factors at play here as well. Yeah,
I agree. And the other thing is that everyone's different. So while there are ways to sort out a leg length discrepancy, it doesn't mean that it's right for everyone. So I actually always don't anymore, but I used to use shims to help my shorter leg be a bit longer. I've got I think more than an inch's difference in leg length. So
wow, I always wonder why you walk around in circles.
Yes, yes, exactly. So so you can compensate for it, but I would go and see a bike fitter first, and then to the immediate problem, to me it sounds like you need to see a physio, and possibly another thing that could help you is doing some strength training, because most injuries, especially on the bike, are actually caused by weaknesses. And with the right kind of strength training, which doesn't have to take very long, you can really help yourself to avoid those injuries.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I would add to that is that it's kind of a warning to all of us out there, and I'm not saying you have done this, but I certainly have in the past, and that if I suddenly start doing loads and loads of riding, particularly long, hard rides, vigorous and with power, then actually that's when you end up with injuries, because you kind of need to build up to a certain level of, fatigue or certain hardness of ride, shall we say. So yeah, that might be the cause of the problem actually, is that you've just simply gone too hard too soon, and your ligaments and your tendons just aren't up to it. But if you want a little bit more info on the whole bike fit thing, then Emma did a cracking video with the Shimano bike fit guys, and so I would definitely check that one out as well to give you a bit of insight about what goes on in a proper bike fit.
So here I see that your left leg is a little bit longer. I see this by just looking at the position of your ankle bone. It's, let's say, a 4 or 5 millimeter difference. Something we will almost certainly see back on the bike.
Right, on to the quickfire round that is never quick, but anyway, here we go. First one, XTD8865. I'm training for a fairly flat 100-mile ride. I'm aiming for an average of 20 to 21 miles an hour. Apart from structured training on a turbo trainer, my weekend rides are mostly hilly. So, shall I focus more on flatter routes at higher speed or hilly routes at lower speed? Will they prepare me equally well?
Well, this is quite an interesting one. We don't often get asked this. We normally get worried questions from people who live somewhere flat, do lots of flat training rides, but they're training for something in the mountains, because that's like a sort of obvious problem. But I actually think this is a really good point, because it's not so much the average speed that's the problem, it's the duration of sustained power. So when you're doing your 100-mile ride on the flat, you won't get many opportunities to rest unless you're sitting behind someone. You won't get any downhills, basically. Whereas when you're on a hilly training ride, you could probably put out more power on the climbs, and then you have a bit of a break. And I found that I like training in the mountains, and I got really bad at riding on the flat, because if I have to put out power, sustained power at the same power level for 4 hours, I can't do it anymore. I really don't like it.
It definitely is a specialist skill, just like being able to ride up hills really fast. The bonus about riding on flat roads, of course, is that you can eat as much as you like, because weight is much less of an issue than it is when climbing up hills. But I would say, in answer to your question, that you will get prepared really well from training in hilly roads, but it's definitely worth doing specific work as well. Now, your turbo trainer, as long as you've got the resistance backed off, that's going to be really good. So, because your actual pedaling style changes when you're riding on flat roads as well. But then do some longer rides on flatter roads as well, if you can, just so that you're ready for that kind of effort, like Emma said, without any kind of recovery.
And I think it depends on the person. So some people are just physiologically suited to riding a long time at a steady power, and some struggle. So if you do a few rides like that in your training, you'll know for yourself how you feel. And also if you get a sore back, because you change your position less when you're on the flat than you do going up and downhill. So you might find that you need to sort of get up every now and then and jiggle around.
Absolutely. I told you this wasn't going to be quick. Right, what's next, Emma?
The next one is, this is an interesting one, I think. This is from Apit Segan, whose question is about power meter versus heart rate monitor.
Good one.
So, not just the simple one about how to train with a heart rate monitor. No, for those that are using a power meter as a training tool, they'll see the improvement in their increased FTP. But for those using heart rate monitors, how do they track their improvement? And that's a really good point.
It is a very good point. And actually, the answer is brilliantly simple, though, isn't it? Old school. Just time yourself over the same section of road. I always used to use the same climb. And you just keep going back to that at regular intervals. Make sure that you freshen up beforehand to a similar extent so you're not too tired. And basically, ride up it as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah, exactly. So the complicated thing is you'll see probably a change in your time and your heart rate as you get fitter, because say if you rode at the same heart rate and you're getting fitter, you'd probably do it quicker for the same heart rate. But as you get fitter, you might be able to raise your heart rate higher. So when you're really fit, you might find that you can both ride the climb quicker and get your heart rate higher. But essentially, at the end of the day, the aim is not to get more power or to change your heart rate. The aim is to do it quicker. So that's the thing you should measure.
It's not bob on accurate, of course. Weather variation is the main problem, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
You'll know full well when you've got a tailwind going up a climb and when you've got a headwind going up a climb. But if you do it often enough, you will definitely get a feel for it.
Yeah.
One other thing here, actually, and it's just an aside, but we were talking about in the GCN show this week about heart rate variability, which you've actually dabbled with training using that as a tool. And it actually, rather than measuring number of beats per minute, it measures the time gaps between each heartbeat because there is a degree of variation there, and it changes depending on your fatigue levels. So actually you can use super accurate heart rate monitors to get a real gauge of how tired you are, and therefore you can change your training load. How good is that?
It's fascinating. I looked into this last year, and worth looking into.
And didn't it tell you were really tired?
Yeah, but I kind of knew that anyway because I kept falling asleep all the time. So I could have probably guessed. But yeah, I was fascinated to find out about heart rate variability. I had no idea that it was measurable. This is a very tiny difference. And also I was confused to find that the more fresh you are, the more your heart rate varies, which I thought was the wrong way around. But
yeah,
actually,
that is a bit counterintuitive, isn't it?
So it means that your body is reacting more to the level of oxygen in your blood. So actually over the course of breathing in and breathing out, your heart rate changes ever so slightly, even though you might have only a few beats.
I feel a video coming on, Emma.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Let's
it really
do it.
is. Yeah.
Right, okay, watch this space. Heart rate variability coming up soon. Right, next up, sitting up in the wind from Mail. If you have a strong tailwind, should you sit up and use your body as a sail, effectively, to help push you along or keep in an aero tug?
Depends how fast the wind is and how fast you're going, I suspect.
I would agree with you there, I guess. If you're not going very fast and you've got a strong tailwind, then you would definitely be advised to make yourself as big as possible and act as a sail.
But if you're going pretty quick, it has to be a very strong wind, or very fast wind, I should say, to be useful. So, if it's blowing a howling gale and you've got a tailwind, sit up and take advantage.
I guess you know, don't you, at that point where wind noise in your ears kind of stops and you get that beautiful sensation of riding in like a silent bubble. And that's the point where you could just sit up on the tops and be like, check it out. But yeah, there we go then. I think that's our answer. Right then, metabolic differences.
Yes, this is from Michael Hancock's. Should riders with fast metabolisms take out more food than those with slow, or should it be the case of simply eating to hunger? Well, I think eating to hunger is always a bit dangerous, frankly, because, I mean, it's great to eat when you're hungry, but often when you're riding, that's a bit too late to be eating.
Very good point. But the amount that people do eat, when they're on the bike and then when they're off the bike, varies massively from person to person, doesn't it? And indeed, from the same person over time. We were just talking about this before we started filming. And when I was, 18, 19 years old, I used to really struggle doing rides over 4 hours long. I used to stuff my face, but I'd always blow. Whereas now, my metabolism, I assume it's down to that, has slowed down to the extent where I don't need to eat half as much to ride, but I can ride for an awful lot longer without blowing.
It's all that
slower, but
endurance training over the years adds up as well.
And old age creeping up on me, I guess. Also, an interesting story, for an anecdote from an old team physiologist who said that, I'm probably not allowed to name names here, he said he didn't want to at the time, even though that was 4 years ago, but he worked with one rider in particular who could basically ride the whole Tour de France just with water in his bottles and maybe one energy bar to get him through a stage. I mean, literally, and he said he worked with another rider on the same team who needed an energy gel every 10 minutes to stop blowing. And that gives you an idea of the discrepancy between individuals.
Yeah, there is a huge amount of variability, and I think you'll know as a rider, because you should find this out in training, what you need to eat and how much. And it is interesting when you meet people who are new in cycling and they do blow up quite a lot because they don't have the endurance base, and it, there is some dependence on body shape and how much fat you store. Basically, I think very skinny people really struggle. They have got to eat more. They're not storing as much. But it's also, you can train yourself to metabolize fat better. So, but it's, basically, yes, eat depending on how much you need to eat.
Yes, basically. Right then, we've got a video on that, thinking about it, not specifically about metabolic rates, but the basic principles about what to eat when you're on a ride.
Yeah.
I think we should check that one out.
Yeah, well, let's leave aside restricting carb intake to try and improve your training response to endurance training. Let's talk about what you need to eat to enjoy riding and get the most out of it.
Right, a couple of cheeky little tech questions for you now. First up, from Pastafari FSM, what's the benefit of road bike pedals over mountain bike pedals? Now, this is a tricky one actually. I suspect, in performance terms, there is no real difference between road pedals and mountain bike pedals, but on feel, I personally prefer the feel of road pedals because your foot is kind of more secure. Now, it doesn't mean you can't move it, it doesn't mean you can't get out, but it means that the shoe doesn't rock on the pedal. There's a much bigger contact area for cleat on pedal.
Bigger contact area, which is gives you a feeling of security.
That's it, yeah. It just kind of feels more positive, really. Whereas on a mountain bike, you've got these little metal cleats, and they rely on the shoe for stability as well, which you never notice when you're riding, do you? But it's just kind of in the back
But
of
on
the
the other
mind.
hand, it's easier to walk in those shoes. So as long you could use mountain bike shoes and pedals on a road bike, and be a lot easier to walk when you get off for coffee or whatever. But it's less aero, and you do look a bit like a mountain biker.
Less aero, and you look like a mountain biker. Yeah, two very important points there at the end. But yeah, I reckon in a blind testing, I wouldn't notice the difference. Actually, no,
It would be extremely hard to do that blind.
In a blind testing, I could tell the difference, but I think if you suddenly dropped me in the middle of a ride and I was pedaling and I was looking at the view, I wouldn't notice the difference.
Yeah.
I think that's what I mean. Yeah, anyway, there we go. What about this one, Emma? Arven's Yanto.
Asks, is it possible to convert from clamp brakes to disc brakes?
No.
Maestro.
No, unfortunately it's not. You need a different fork and a different frame in order to be able to go from rim brakes to disc brakes. And indeed different wheels as well.
So can I ask GCN something now? Is it possible to buy, or does anyone make a frame or a fork that does both?
I believe that they do, but the trouble is you then end up with a frame that's over-engineered for rim brakes, and then you wouldn't necessarily get all the benefits of disc brakes either, where you would have less tyre clearance in order to get a rim brake on there, whereas obviously with discs you don't need that problem. So no, but it's not, I don't know. Depending on where you live, it wouldn't be worth selling your bike just to get disc brakes, I don't think.
Depends what you're using it for, really.
Yeah, that is true. But I mean, the difference between them is pretty major at times. Certainly here in the UK, where we put up with
I've noticed
rain 364 days a year.
But actually, we've got a video on disc brakes versus rim brakes, which you might like to check out.
Right, run number 3. Rain with a little bit of snow on discs. Ready? Off we go. Oh, God.
Right, final question. Here we go. This is from Will Barron. It's quite an interesting one, actually. He said, when you crash, Lycra shreds. So I was wondering, did the old-fashioned wool gear provide more protection? I'd imagine it might shred less, but wool fibres might get ground into the wound, so it might not be better long-term. That does sound gross, actually.
Yeah.
It's a long time since roadies shifted to Lycra, with its many advantages, so it could be lost information. Does anyone out there know? Well, I can't say that I've ever seen knee or elbow protectors made out of wool, so...
No, I've got a bit of personal experience on this. I used to go mountain biking wearing old school wool jerseys, and having fallen off using those, I can definitely attest to the fact that they shred as well, pretty quickly. And also, I think you pointed this out as well earlier, that you can still get cut through your clothing anyway, can't you?
even if I've had crashes where the sock has been fine, but my ankle has been trashed, so, you know... And I don't think the wool fibres getting into the wound is such a problem, but there is a problem in that wool is generally knitted. So once you've got a little hole in it, it will unravel. Yeah. Whereas Lycra is not normally knitted, I'm pretty sure. So you can get a hole in it and you can still use it, although it does look a bit shabby, but you can get away with it without sort of your entire jersey disintegrating on you. Yeah,
don't forget as well though that there's a whole kind of new developments in Lycra technology, I guess, where things like ceramics are woven in, or carbon fibres even. So you actually get super, super tough, durable Lycra that feels like a normal cycling short, but you can actually slide down the road in and it's not going to disintegrate. Yeah. Again, you still might get a sore bum, but you know, the Lycra itself will stay intact. So yeah, I definitely don't think you should go turning back to wool shorts and wool jerseys in order to try and get some kind of robust crash protection.
No,
basically. Yeah, anyway, that is unfortunately an end to this week's Ask GCN Anything. Do make sure, of course, that you give us your questions that you would like answered. Stick them either in the comment section down below or submit them on social media using the hashtag TalkBack. And then I think perhaps it's time to watch another video. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you could check out this video, which we've made in Alpe video, which is how to climb comfortably on a beautiful climb.